Hi, I'm Alex Halpren, and today I will be talking to you about alternative education curriculums and what the issue exactly is with the education system right now in terms of personal connection between the student and the stuff they're learning throughout the years that they're in education, right? All right, I'm just gonna get right into it. So I divided this into four compartments. So the first one is essentially two Pew Research studies, and they basically, in both of them, it's basically like, oh, do you think that education should be reformed? And then also, um, do you think education is going in the wrong direction? And here's why, right? So in both of those studies, about 2/3 of the people that were surveyed thought that education was going in the wrong direction, slash it needed some work, it needs some reform, right? Now, of course, it divides it along political, generational, and education level lines, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact that it's a majority of the respondents thought that education, which American education, right, needed some reform to it. So that leads me into my second compartment, which is Catcher in the Rye, which is a cult classic, and individuals, including myself, when I first read it in high school, um, related to the main character, Holden Caulfield, and his general cynicism for the world. And the reasoning behind why I chose this book specifically was due to the notoriety. The fact that some of the messages within it are still relevant about 70 years after publishing. That's pretty big. I gathered three quotes from the book the second time through, which illustrated his alienation that, again, is not specific to just him. It can happen in the real world to any kind of student, those being an alienation for specifically schoolwork. Why am I spending 8 hours on this assignment, right? Or how many times for this class I don't really want to do? And then alienation from closure in a time of transition. A good example of this is, last year when I was still a high school student, I didn't really get a graduation due to COVID-19. So when those those defined transition ceremonies are taken away, what happens, right? Do you just kind of connect it to your high school experience and you're still burnt out, right? And alienation from social relationships. Why am I putting stock in any institution for that matter, if I don't have social relationships that are making me want to empathize with other people and to say, hey, we need to do some fixing here because I care about my fellow person, right? This leads me to my third compartment, which is analyzing what Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle thought about education, which, I mean, I'm going to try and interpret it the best I can. Philosophy is hard to grasp, right? I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that. And I'm a philosophy major right now. So, you know, so essentially they all agreed on that education, at least from what I looked at, is when the students need to improve the body and mind, that duality, the body and mind, right? And where they differed and basically a reach and rise towards something greater than themselves, right? Whether that's self-improvement, virtue, the good, and that's where they differ. They differ with in terms of what is the good. But that for another time, that's another tangent. Essentially, though, you could say they agree in the fact that education needs to be about giving students the opportunity to self-improve, to reach and rise and grow and not just go through the motions, not just get a 4-year degree and then at the end of it say, what now, right? So, sorry. Lastly, my fourth compartment, I investigated what experiential education is, and that led me to the Queen's University in Canada, which defined it as, quote, a philosophy that informs many methodologies in which educators purposefully engage with learners in direct experience and focused reflection in order to increase knowledge, develop skills, clarify values, and develop people's capacity to contribute to their communities. That is a mouthful. And close quote, my bad. With this definition in mind, I then investigated Montessori style of education and its student independent focused style, I guess, and what that was specifically about. Locked into the curriculum, and it essentially emphasizes the teacher as a guide and the role of the student as an explorer who has some nonlinear choice within the confines of the curriculum. You could argue it's less about self-improvement, in terms of the body and mind explicitly, but it is essentially a method in which students can find ways in which to improve themselves on their own. This leads me to my next example, which is more explicit, Outward Bound. This is an international organization founded by Kurt Hahn and Lawrence Holt in 1941. I want to know specifically what the outcome was and what in more specific details, what they did with their students to give them opportunities for growth and self-improvement. The study I looked at was taken in the New Zealand chapter, and it gathered most respondents within this qualitative study. They generally thought Outward Bound improved their self-confidence and their self-awareness, where specifically outdoor activities, which is what Outward Bound is known for, that required teamwork, such as sailing and obstacle courses, led to improvements in those two areas. The other group of students that also listed an improvement in those two areas was with the solo journey. Now, the solo journey is essentially where an individual is alone in the wilderness with provided food, of course, for either a few hours in range to 3 days maximum. Of course, it's determined on their physical and emotional welfare. In conclusion, I must leave this as a to be continued, as just with this small amount of research, I've concluded that education reform is indeed necessary. We need to build a curriculum which promotes opportunities for students to grow self-awareness and self-confidence and reach and rise to their higher capabilities. So I think looking toward experiential education is that first step needed to start reform. Overall, I learned a lot from this experience, and I hope y'all learned a thing or two during this presentation. Have a good one.